What happens when a DNA test reveals the impossible on live television? Dr. Phil stood frozen, holding a white envelope in his trembling hand. "Stop the tape," he said quietly. The studio went completely silent. A young woman on stage had just collapsed into sobs, and in the audience, an older woman had risen to her feet, her face drained of all color. The envelope contained a truth that would shatter everything these two women believed about their lives. What Dr. Phil read next would become the most unforgettable moment in the show's 20-year history. 24 hours earlier, the day had begun like any other taping. Sarah Mitchell, 28, had written to the Dr. Phil show 6 months prior, desperate for answers about her adoption. She'd been raised by loving parents in Ohio, but they'd passed away in a car accident 3 years ago, taking with them the few details they knew about her birth mother. "All I have is this," Sarah had written in her submission letter, attaching a photo of a small silver bracelet with the initials ER engraved inside. "It was pinned to my blanket when I was found at a fire station in 1996. I need to know where I came from." The Dr. Phil production team had done what they always did: thorough research, background checks, and DNA database searches. What they found was nothing. No matches. No leads. But Dr. Phil had learned over 2 decades that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones you tell anyway, because telling them creates the possibility of miracles. Nobody, not the producers, not Dr. Phil, not Sarah, knew that the miracle was already sitting in the audience. The taping began at 2 p.m. Sarah walked onto the stage to warm applause, clutching a tissue in one hand and a manila folder in the other. She was petite, with auburn hair and green eyes that held both hope and exhaustion. Dr. Phil greeted her with his characteristic directness tempered by genuine warmth. "Sarah, you've been searching for 3 years. Tell me what you know," Dr. Phil began, settling into his chair across from her. "Almost nothing," Sarah's voice cracked. "I was left at a fire station in Columbus, Ohio, on March 15, 1996. I was approximately 6 months old. No note. No name. Just this bracelet." She held up the delicate silver chain, and the cameras zoomed in on the initials. In the audience, in row 7, seat 12, a woman named Ellen Rodriguez felt her heart skip. She leaned forward, squinting at the screen showing the close-up of the bracelet. Her hand instinctively moved to her neck, where an identical bracelet had hung for 28 years, until she'd lost it in 1996. "The family that adopted me," Sarah continued. "They told me they tried to find my birth mother, but there was nothing. No missing person reports, no hospital records of a birth. It's like I appeared out of nowhere." Dr. Phil's expression was thoughtful. "Sarah, we ran your DNA through every available database. I want to be straight with you, we didn't find your birth mother." Sarah's face fell, tears streaming down her cheeks. In the audience, Ellen's hands began to shake. But Dr. Phil wasn't finished. "However," he continued, standing up in a way that signaled this moment was different, "we did run your DNA through a broader genealogy database. And we found something unexpected." He walked to his desk and picked up the white envelope. The audience collectively held their breath. Sarah sat up straighter, gripping the arms of her chair. "Before I open this," Dr. Phil said, turning to face the cameras directly, breaking the fourth wall in a way he rarely did, "I need everyone to understand something. What's about to happen? I've been doing this for 20 years, and I have never, in my entire career, seen anything like this." The studio lights seemed to brighten, or maybe it was just the intensity of the moment making everything feel more vivid. Dr. Phil looked at Sarah, then scanned the audience with an expression that was part wonder, part disbelief. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. "Sarah," Dr. Phil said slowly, "your DNA matched someone in our genealogy database at a 99.9% parent-child probability." Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "You found her? You found my mother?" "That's what I thought," Dr. Phil said, his voice steady but his eyes showing emotion. But then my team did something we don't normally do. We cross-referenced a match with our audience registration list. The air in the studio changed. Producers in the control room leaned closer to their monitors. Audience members began looking at each other, confused and curious. Ellen Rodriguez, in row 7, felt the room spin. She knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew. Sarah, Dr. Phil continued, his voice dropping to a softer register. Your DNA match isn't just in the database. She's here. Right now. In this studio. The gasp that went through the audience was audible even over the studio's soundproofing. Sarah stood up, looking wildly around the room, tears now streaming freely down her face. Dr. Phil opened the envelope slowly, his hands, for the first time in his career, actually shaking slightly. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and read, Ellen Marie Rodriguez. Row 7, seat 12. The moment that followed would be replayed millions of times across the world. Ellen stood on trembling legs. The spotlight swung to her, and the cameras captured every detail of her face. The shock, the recognition, the 28 years of buried grief suddenly surfacing. She was 52, with auburn hair streaked with gray, and green eyes, the exact same shade as Sarah's. Oh my God! Ellen whispered, her voice picked up by the nearby audience microphones. Oh my God! The bracelet. The bracelet. Dr. Phil, showing the instincts that had made him one of television's most trusted figures, immediately took control. Ellen, can you come down here? We're going to stop tape for a moment. He looked directly at the control room camera and said firmly, Cut cameras. Everyone out except essential personnel. Now. The production team knew that tone. In 20 years they'd heard it maybe 5 times. When Dr. Phil said, now, like that you moved. Within 60 seconds the studio had cleared except for Dr. Phil, Sarah, Ellen, 2 cameras, and a sound engineer. The house lights came up, destroying the television magic but creating something more important, privacy in the midst of chaos. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He set down his microphone, walked off the stage, and gestured for both women to follow him to the guest chairs, arranging them so they faced each other rather than him. This wasn't about the show anymore. This was about 2 human beings whose lives had just collided in the most impossible way. Ellen, Dr. Phil said gently, sitting down but making himself smaller, less central to the moment. Tell us about the bracelet. Ellen's hands shook as she reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch. From it, she withdrew an identical silver bracelet with the initials SM engraved inside. Sarah Mitchell, she whispered, reading the initials she'd engraved 28 years ago. I named you Sarah Mitchell after my grandmother. I wore the one with my initials so I'd never forget you. And then I lost it. She started to cry. I lost it the same day I lost you. Sarah's sobs filled the studio. You kept it? All these years? Every day. Ellen said, tears streaming down her face. Every single day for 28 years, I've worn your matching bracelet and wondered where you were. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He looked at his production team through the camera, then back at the 2 women, and made a decision that broke every protocol in television production. We're not filming this next part. Turn off the cameras. The red recording lights blinked off. What happened in the next 30 minutes would remain private forever, known only to the few people in that room. Dr. Phil sat with Ellen and Sarah as Ellen told the story she'd never told anyone. She'd been 17, homeless, and terrified. The father was gone. Her family had disowned her. She'd given birth alone in a shelter bathroom, held her baby for 6 hours, and then, in what she described as both the hardest and most loving decision of her life, had left Sarah at a fire station with the bracelet and a prayer that someone would give her daughter the life she couldn't provide. I went back the next day. Ellen sobbed. The fire station said they'd already taken you to child services. I tried to get you back. I tried so hard. But I had no ID, no proof you were mine, and they said, They said I'd abandoned you. That I'd committed a crime. I was so scared they'd arrest me that I ran. Sarah reached across the space between them and took Ellen's hands. You saved me. You gave me to people who loved me so much. Did they? Ellen looked up, desperate for this one piece of comfort. Did they love you? So much. Sarah whispered. They told me every day that my birth mother must have loved me very much to make sure I was safe. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. After 30 minutes, Dr. Phil made a decision. He called the cameras back on, but this time he spoke directly to the audience with a gravity that made it clear this was no longer just a show. What you're about to see, he said, looking directly into the camera, is why we do this work. Ellen and Sarah have agreed to share part of their conversation with you, because they believe their story might help someone else out there who's struggling with similar choices. The cameras rolled again. Dr. Phil facilitated one of the most raw, honest conversations about adoption, poverty, shame, and love that had ever been broadcast on daytime television. Ellen spoke about the systemic failures that had left her, a pregnant teenager, with no options and no support. Sarah spoke about the grief of adoptees who love their adoptive parents, but still feel an ache for their biological roots. And then Dr. Phil did what he does best. He provided resources. Ellen, Sarah, I've been on the phone with my team during our break. We've arranged for both of you to receive genetic counseling, family therapy, and ongoing support as you navigate this relationship. This is just the beginning of your journey together, and you're not going to do it alone. He pulled out 2 business cards and handed one to each woman. These are direct lines to therapists who specialize in adoption reunion cases. They're expecting your calls, and all costs are covered. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled out a small box from his desk drawer. I had my team work on this during our break. Inside were 2 new bracelets, custom-made by a jeweler who'd rushed them over. Each had both sets of initials, ER and SM, intertwined. The old bracelets represent the past, the loss, the separation, the years of not knowing, Dr. Phil said softly. These new ones represent the future you're going to build together. The audience, who'd been let back in for the final segment, rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. Sarah and Ellen stood, embraced, and didn't let go. The cameras captured it all, the tears, the trembling, the disbelief, the joy, the grief, and the overwhelming sense that something impossible had just become real. Dr. Phil, who'd maintained his professional composure throughout, wiped his own eyes. In 20 years of broadcasting, through thousands of episodes and tens of thousands of guests, this moment stood alone. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the cameras stopped rolling for the final time, Dr. Phil did something else unusual. He invited Ellen and Sarah to stay in Los Angeles for 3 days as his personal guests, arranging for them to stay at a hotel and providing them with access to therapists and counselors who could help them process what had just happened. 6 months later, Dr. Phil did a follow-up episode. Sarah and Ellen appeared together, holding hands, both wearing their new bracelets. The update was remarkable. Ellen had gotten her GED and enrolled in community college. Sarah had welcomed Ellen into her life and introduced her to her late adoptive parents' extended family. They spoke every day. Dr. Phil, Ellen said during that follow-up, you gave me back my daughter. But more than that, you gave me back my hope. I'd spent 20 years thinking I was a terrible person for what I did. You helped me understand I was a mother who made an impossible choice out of love, Sarah added, and you gave me answers I thought I'd never have. But more than that, you showed me that my story, our story, matters. That it can help other people. The ripple effects of that single episode were extraordinary. 3 adoption agencies contacted the show to say they'd seen a 300% increase in birth mothers reaching out for reunion services. A senator cited the episode in a speech advocating for better support for pregnant teenagers. And most incredibly, 17 other audience members from that taping reached out to do DNA tests, wondering if they too might have unknown connections. 2 of them found relatives they didn't know existed. But perhaps the most powerful impact was quieter and harder to measure: the thousands of emails the show received from adoptees, birth parents, and adoptive families saying that seeing Ellen and Sarah's story had given them permission to talk about their own complicated feelings about adoption. Dr. Phil kept that white envelope. It sits in a frame in his office, along with a photo of Sarah and Ellen embracing on stage. Beneath it is a small plaque that reads, "Sometimes the miracle isn't finding the answer. It's asking the question in the right place at the right time." In his private reflections, shared later in an interview, Dr. Phil said, "I've built my career on helping people confront hard truths. But that day, the truth found us. All we did was create the space for it to be revealed." Ellen and Sarah did the hard part. They had the courage to be vulnerable in front of millions of people, and in doing so, they gave permission for others to be vulnerable too. The DNA test that linked Sarah to Ellen didn't just connect two people. It connected a nation of viewers to a conversation about love, loss, choice, and the complicated beauty of families formed in unexpected ways. The legacy of that envelope, that moment, that impossible connection, continues to resonate. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing television can do isn't to entertain, or even to educate. It's to witness. To hold space for the miraculous, the painful, and the profoundly human moments that remind us we're all connected in ways we can't always see, until suddenly, impossibly, we can. And on that day, in that studio, with cameras rolling and an audience holding its collective breath, Dr. Phil McGraw didn't just host a show. He midwifed a miracle.